Hey, this is Ocular Cavity back with another art video again. This one is also for T.R.Dasilva doing his improvement, day challenge for art. I'm going to be looking at frames today and kind of how to build your own frame because everybody has a frame that they use when they think is best for them. And one of the things that you can do is you can use somebody else's if you find one that suits you. But a lot of times you kind of just have to kind of invent your own. You might take bits of other people's frames, kind of use them on your own. But we'll take a quick look at his video. We're not going to have the audio on because if you want to see the video, I'm going to put a link below. So go watch it on his channel to make sure he gets the views and the likes and everything. So he was using the picture of Chun-Li to study it for, try to build a frame. He said he had a friend of his helping him. And we're going to use the same picture to try to, build a frame or show you how you would want to build a frame using this picture. Now, I've got a frame that I've been using for years, and everybody, once they get used to it, has that frame that they personally love or that they personally use. And I don't think that any two people use the exact same frame. Even people that have learned from somebody else's frame is gonna they kind of make it their own. And so this is kind of showing you that if you really don't know where to start or really don't know how to begin, kind of gives you a starting point where you can kind of develop your own frame. And it doesn't matter whether anybody else likes it, doesn't matter whether anybody else uses it. What matters is that it works for you. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today is how to find out something that works for you. And it's going to be a lot of experimentation. Okay, so let's go back to Clip Studio Paint and get started. Now, in the basic talk of frames and what kind of frame to use, there's a lot of frames out there, but you can kind of break them down into two kind of distinct categories. Let's open up the picture of Chun-Li. I already preloaded it into the software so that we can have it in the reference. And so we'll kind of use this pose as the reference for this. Now, this time, I know you guys have noticed by now, I'm doing the video vertically. And I'm doing that because it kind of is easier for me to draw when layout's vertical, and it makes it so that I don't have to worry about running out of space when I'm drawing because I'm using a very small and Android Galaxy Tab 6 Lite tablet, so it doesn't give me a whole lot of room to work with. And when I bring up the menu, that takes up most of it. And the last video I uploaded, I had it landscape format, and it there was a good like 2/3 of it being taken up by the menu, and the menu didn't even have all the things I needed on it. So we'll find, and I had to tilt it sideways a lot to try to make it so that I could still draw on it, even so it was sideways for me, but it was up right side up for you. So I don't know if this really bothers you guys doing it vertically. Tell me in the comments, and I'll find some way to do it landscape and figure out some kind of better way to make it work. But just for convenience sake, I just defaulting it to this way. So let's talk back to on topic. We're going to talk about the two basic frame types, and then kind of a two sub frame, types for each of the two basic ones. So the two basic ones you're going to have like a skeletal frame, which in this case, since she's sitting up there, we'll give her a little spine. She's got a little bit of a sway to her spine because she's got the lean going. And then you'd have the shoulders, the arms, and it's basically more or less the skeletal frame's more or less kind of like a stick figure-ish frame, but instead of using the classic stick man where the arm's just attached to the spine line, you're going to give them shoulders and hips. So we were going to have the legs going out here. And some people, will put circles on the bottom or the elbows or whatever. This is just a really, 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 really basic, what you'd call a wireframe in the world of animation to be kind of a wireframe. Now, I don't use this kind of a frame. So for me, this is all just kind of an approximation. Unless I'm trying to capture a pose really, really quick and I'm really short on time. And that was a long time ago when I was doing that even. I still capture in my usual frame because I've gotten fast enough with my usual frame that I don't really have time constraints. So a skeletal frame is more or less like this. It's a basic internal skeleton of whatever the character is. Now, out of this subtype, you'll have basically two types after this, where one will be like this, where it's more or less just stick lines, and then some people, let's say you were trying to do this for real, they'll use like instead of having the leg be like this, they'll actually draw like a real skeleton where the hip, like if this was the leg bone, they'd have it like this, and then like instead of the hips being a line, they'll actually draw like the hip bone shape and for each leg. Now, this you can tell I don't do this regularly, so I have no clue what I'm doing here because I've not learned enough anatomy to be able to do skeletal structures well. I would need a reference to be able to do anything more than this, and then you'd have the spine kind of coming up. But the spine, usually, I think everybody just kind of does a line. So that's kind of your skeletal frame. We're going to erase that because it's just taking up space and it's ridiculous. But that's the two variant types of this frame that you'll have the stick line one, and then the one that's more like an anatomically correct skeleton ish. But once again, I don't use this framework. So if you want to use that one, the line one is the easiest, but you know, you have to already know anatomy for the line one, I think, to work. If you don't know your own, if you haven't gotten your anatomy down right yet, which even I don't have an anatomy good enough to use the skeletal one, but even just using the stick line one, you'll need to be able to fill in the gaps because any like where her leg or her arms are, you'll need to be able to fill in those muscle groups on your own without any help from the frame. So the second frame type is the one I use, which is what I would call a volume frame. Volume frames are where you use shapes to kind of fill out where the body would be. So even though you've got the head, you may have a, in this case, a spinal line, but just to line it up, but you're going to be using circles. In my case, I'll be using circles and ovals to kind of, oops, I think I put this, I didn't do the abs quite right. So maybe do that here, here, here. And since one leg goes off to this side, and this leg kind of goes straight. Gonna bring her arms up a bit. And this is rough and sloppy, but you kind of get the idea that this is more or less the frame I use, and you get a lot of the body volume done just by drawing the frame. And I haven't done anything much yet, and she's you can tell that you got a body here and you've got something to it, and then you can refine it as you go along. Now I use circles and ovals and all that, but you don't have to do that. One of the frames I've seen other people use online is a similar kind of thing, but instead of using circles, they'll use like triangles. So instead of having the circles, they may be like a circle for the head, but they'll have the torso be a triangle, and then like the waist and hips kind of be another triangle, and then they'll do other shapes for the other ones. Like they might have a circle for the shoulders, but then they'll have like a cylinder or a rectangle, and then a circle, and then another cylinder. Now, once again, this is not a frame type I use, so my proficiency with it is really bad, but it gets you a relative idea of what this one can kind of be like. Now, one I saw that somebody uses instead of using, and let me get a good eraser out, get this hard eraser out, get rid of the body here. Instead of using triangles, I've also seen people use rectangles or trapezoids. So you can switch back to the soft eraser and go back to the pen, and they'll have like a kind of a prism, rectangular prismy shape for the torso. Now I ended up with blocky looking people because if I use blocky looking shapes, I end up with blocky looking people. So, but if that's not a problem you struggle with, then this frame may just be the right one for you. Because I've had people say that the reason they use this frame is it gives them a better idea of which way the person is facing. And then you have like the cylinder legs. It gives them a better sense of front versus back versus side. So if you have a hard time keeping up with the front back side to side thing, this frame may end up being it. So you kind of end up got two variations. You got your skeletal one that's like a line, and as well as a proper skeletal one, which I can't really do. And then you got your shape frames, which are kind of you can pick, cylinders or hard edge shapes like squares, triangles, and trapezoids or whatever. And then like mine are circles and ovals. Now, if you're still trying to figure out how to break down the character into shapes, then we're going to do the breakdown now. So we can get the frame. We'll open up a new layer, make this layer invisible, make that one invisible, and we'll take this, which is a zoomed in version of that picture, and we're going to bring down the opacity so that we can see through it. You need just to be able to see enough so that you can tell the difference between the character and the background. All right, so if we were going to try to break her down into a frame, now back when I started drawing. My framework, I was struggling because I had so many people showing me frames and almost none of them were working. One of my friends even showed me this really simple circle one, and that's kind of what got me going in the direction of circles and ovals because his frame at least did work. His was very simple because he was good, so he didn't need much frame to be able to draw a character, and he had his style already pretty figured out. But in this case, I didn't. I was still trying to learn. So if you're trying to learn like I was, once I saw his frame and started to know I wanted to move in a circle-ish direction, but I didn't know exactly what kind of circles to use. I needed more circles than he did. I would print out. This was before I had anything along the lines of a digital display or a digital tablet, anything like that. I'm not even sure if those things were available back then, but if they were, you would have had to been rich to get one because they would have been multi-thousand-dollar things. I would print out a picture of whatever the character I was trying to learn how to frame out, and then I'd flip the page over and then draw on the back and use a light to kind of get the image to show through, so you could kind of line out the character. So you get this picture, you fade it out so that you can line out, and then you have a new layer on top. You draw the layer on top so you don't ruin the picture while you're trying this, and you start kind of getting the general outline of the character's body. And then once you've gotten the general outline of their body, you figure out what kind of shapes it would take to fill that. So we've got, and then we got our head. Somewhere in there's her neck. It's kind of hard to see, but I can kind of imagine where her neck is because I've been drawing for long enough. It'd be easier, obviously, it'd be better if you could pick a picture that's little bit clearer than this, but this is just an example, so it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs in her ears or on the side here. Now, each art style, her leg probably under there somewhere. I'm guessing because I know about the proportions, but picking something that's easier to define is always better. Now, if you take, once you've gotten this, her hands are back here. I can actually see her hands just a hair, and that's her wrist up there. Now, if we were going to take this, now we can take the original picture and fade that away, and then you get the basic shape of the character. Now, how would you break this in? So when I was starting to learn, I decided to use the circles and ovals. So usually you end up with the abs somewhere around here. So the oval becomes an easy placement for the abs. Torso here. So that ended up being circle. So that was why. And then I would use, the reason I started using circles and ovals for the arms is because the shoulder joint kind of automatically lends itself to being a circle. It kind of helps you remind where those parts are. So my framework does a lot of the work so that you don't have, so that if your anatomy is poor, my frame is designed to kind of help with people who don't have good anatomy yet. If you can get the placement of the circles and ovals right, you can kind of get some of the muscle groups or areas that look like the muscle groups without having. Actually, you know what? I probably should have. Let's see how far back I can go. I'm not sure if it's going to let me. Nope, I can't go back any further than that. Oh well. Looks like that's as far as I can go. I should have probably done this on another layer so I didn't ruin my outline, but not the end of the world. This is just an example anyway. And so then oval for the forearms. And then usually I use triangles or hand-shaped objects. You can kind of do whatever suits you. And then circle for the head. And usually what I do is I add the jaw on top of the head. Sometimes I'll do a big circle that kind of encompasses the jaw when I first start, and then I'll separate it out later and do a proper head later. And then usually what I do to remember where the collarbone is I'll do a line in between the two shoulder circles. And then for the hips, I usually do big circles, and it's kind of cheating because if you do the two circles and you kind of want them to overlap if you can, the reason you do it like that is it doubles as a butt. If you are going to turn her, she had her back turned to us. All you have to do is kind of erase some of the lines, and those two circles kind of become butt. When it's a guy, I tend to do one circle because guys don't have as much hips as girls do, so it kind of looks a little bit better. You keep your guys from looking girly if you use one circle instead of two. And so for most of them, so with the legs, you just do ovals again, coming off the circles. Now, sometimes when I'm getting lost on a pose, because it's with the circle frame, it's easy to kind of get lost in your pose because they're all round and round circles are kind of round no matter which direction you look at them from. So it could kind of run a problem. Sometimes I'll use separation lines. Like since this is going to be the center of her torso, I'll have a line that I'll trace up her torso to kind of give you a reminder that this is the front and this is the direction she's facing. Same with the legs. Sometimes I'll give her leg lines to give you an idea of where the legs are connected and which direction they're going from the frame. Now, the only reason I'm using this one is because this is my frame. So because it's my frame, it's easiest for me to show what to do with it. Whereas if this was a frame you were coming up with, and then we can give her a little bit. Well, that'd be giving her more bust than she's actually got in the picture. I'm sorry, but you give a little bit of rust because these are circles as well, or ovals, depending on how you want to lay it out. And because of the circles tend to lend themselves to this shape, it just ends up being easier that way. And so then you can take that old picture and layer it back, and it all fits in, and it even allows you to guess where certain parts of the body are going, even if they're off the screen, because the rest of the what's already there kind of gives you like the almost like the inverse kinematics of where things are going. And so it's not a perfect frame, and everybody's got to find their own frame. So as you do this, you'll figure out what shapes work best for you. But if you have pictures you want to figure out how to frame, or you have an artist style you're trying to emulate, or take the bits that you like out of that style and incorporate it into your own style, you can use this method of just kind of getting a character, thinning it out, getting the basics, and then figuring out how to frame it. Now, obviously, you don't want to go tracing somebody's whole piece and act like it's yours, but if you're still just trying to learn how to frame, using a piece and then separating it out to get an idea of how you want to do how the layout would have to go to turn it into a frame, it's an easy way of kind of getting where the frame would go. And so you end up with a character. Now, obviously, we can take this down and make a new layer, and we can try and see if we can do this with the cylinder trapezoid shapes. Like I said, not my specialty and not a framework. I tried the rectangle, triangle, trapezoidal cylinder one. It did not work for me. I was so bad at it. So I don't think it's because the frame doesn't work. It's just it didn't work for me. I was not good at it. So as you're going, you'll find out which frames work for you as you go, and then just keep experimenting because eventually you'll find one, or you'll make one of your own if you have to, like I sort of did. Nobody exactly uses the frame I do, so the fact that it is out there is only because I invented it and started using it myself. But even my friend who showed me how to use circles for a frame, he had his own slant on it too. And having your own slant on the frame is what kind of makes it yours, and it'll suit you best because you made it. It's not somebody else that's telling you how to do it. It's you kind of discovering on your own what to do. So somewhere under there is the leg, and somewhere under here is the leg, something like that. Kind of guessing here, but that'll have to do. All right, so let's try to see if we can turn this into a trapezoidal frame. So we'll give it to that. And so one of the guys I watched, he made the bottom hips like this kind of a shape, and then had it kind of square out. And then he had it where it was like one side would kind of flare one way and one would kind of flare the other. So maybe like this and like this maybe. And then some people have a circle in between to attach the legs to. So they'll have like a circle here and then like a cylinder here. And then it becomes a leg. Now this, like I said, once again, the way I was talking earlier, if you're doing it this way, you will need to learn your own anatomy from looking at anatomical drawings and muscle groups because you're going to need to add muscle. When you make a frame like this, it'll help you get the pose in great detail. Sometimes I see people have a circle in the center for this one because you're not going to have an anatomy after this because this is basically just a generic shape that's almost like one of those dolls that you can pose to do poses. It's not going to have any anatomy on its own. And then maybe like a circle for shoulders like I was doing, and then cylinder for the arms, and then a circle for the elbows. And so it ends up kind of being a find the shapes game where you can kind of find shapes to fill the space. And depending on how hard it is for you to fill in the rest of the details determines which ones work for you. Now this frame, it works, and I've seen a lot of people use it. Doesn't work for me, but it doesn't, that doesn't mean anything. Everybody's going to find out what works for them. But for me, this one was not it. It took me way too long to do it, and then they'll use like a cylinder for the neck, and then circle for the head. And so you kind of end up with two different variants of the volume frame. You've got the one that's using polygons, and you've got one that's using basically just circles. And this one always suits me because when it's done, it almost looks like a body without you having to do much. This one, you'd still have to do a lot of work to make this look like a person. Like if I got rid of the outline, I don't want to get rid of the outline because it's part of it right now, but if I erase the outline, that wouldn't look like a person. That would still look like a kind of a robot-y combination of shapes. Whereas the other one does kind of look like a person. So yeah, you guys can kind of see, you guys can kind of pick how you want to do a frame system, but this will kind of give you something to build on. So if you're just starting to learn, try this out, do the outlining method, and see what you end up with, because you might be able to come up with something that nobody else has done before and that it suits you personally and it makes you feel comfortable doing it, and that's the bit that'll make it so that you'll grow, because people can tell you, what works for them, but since we're all different, everything works different for different people. But this kind of gives you the building blocks to start from. So everybody, when you get a chance, give this a shot. And T.R.Dasilva, I hope this helps you out. Anybody who's interested in following his journey, I'm going to leave a link in the description below for his video. So go watch him, send him some love, and any tips or tricks you can teach him, you can learn him, give it to him. But be nice and be accepting. Don't be, harsh or mean, because there's enough of that out there. So everybody be nice to each other and keep drawing. Peace out.